anyways, I'm going to take. We'll get back to church history after a while, but I kind of want to. There's something else I've been wanting to address. It might take 2 or 3 weeks to do it, maybe 4. During the summer, like I said, I have spent literally hundreds of hours driving. I make like 2 or 3 trips to Detroit now every week. Thousands of miles on the car, so there's a lot of thinking time there. And when I get into Detroit, there is one particular maybe if you guys are down there a lot. I like WJR at 760 AM, where they have all the talk radio and all that. So it's mostly a conservative. Yeah, usually it's about Flint when I can really hear it clear. I've heard it as far north as Tawas, but it's kind of scratchy. Do you? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes a difference. So I get usually an uninterrupted 18 hours a day of conservative political commentary. And they start talking about stuff, and I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And also this summer I've been watching the Democratic candidates coalesce for president, listening to the stuff that the so-called squad has been saying all summer long. Huh? Say again? Oh, yeah, okay. Anyways, and I do think, as much as it drives them batty, I like the way that Trump has been tweeting to the point where he drives these people actually insane. And they're really tearing the face off of what they really are this summer. And we're being able to see what the Democratic Party really is, in spite of what they have pretended to be for the last 40 or 50 years. So, what I've always believed this, but it really has coalesced and solidified this summer in that almost every political cause that these people espouse really is a mask for a deeper spiritual issue. I see it as open warfare and rebellion against a sovereign creator God. You name the issue, and there is some aspect of God's creation and sovereignty that they're fighting against. Some of these things are really obvious. Abortion, that's an obvious one. Homosexuality, that's an obvious one. But you start getting in the weeds a little bit with some of these others, like, overpopulation, the environment, climate change. Against work, they want the productive to pay for the non-productive. And one thing I've seen over and over this summer, I make these appointments to interview these people, and I set an appointment for 11 o'clock. That's usually what I try to get down there by 11 and start my first one. They know I'm coming. At 11 o'clock, I knock on the door, and they show up in the door, still wearing their jammies. And then as I interview them, I go over financial stuff with them. I'm trying to find, is there a reason for you possibly to be doing insurance fraud? There's a financial motivation. Are you employed? And they will say stuff like, well, I just can't find a job. And my thought is, well, if you're not getting out of bed till 12 o'clock, I can see why you're not getting a job. Or why you didn't keep the last job you had. Whatever. So, but we still pay for them. The monthly income now for SSI is $760. I didn't know that before I started this job. That's what these people live on, and they're content to live on it, I guess, as long as they don't have to work for it. So, anyways, yeah. Well, I remember when I talked to this one. No, they get $760 cash. Then usually they got food stamps. And this one lady, she was living in a fairly nice apartment complex. And I said, what's your rent? She said she said $70 a month. I said, you're kidding. How are you paying $70 a month for this townhouse that has 3 floors? It has an upper, main floor, basement. Oh, I'm on the Section 8 thing that they Section 8 where the government pays for most of it. So, we're paying for these people because and most of them are able-bodied. Stuff like that. So, since the fall of man, and then after when Noah came off the ark, man has been very contemptuous and defiant towards God in almost everything. And it is clear that the Satan, this stuff is satanically inspired, and Satan is the prince of the power of the air. and he is running things. I want to just start off here with a few scripture verses, and then I'm going to go into this. And as I study the scripture and see what's going on around us and things that are happening, I'm convinced that the return of Christ is around the corner. It has to be near. Everything's being put in place for the arrival of Antichrist. And you listen to what's going on, like in China, with their social scoring they're doing now, where they control every aspect of everything you do. If you don't meet their score or what you should be, you can't do anything. And I used to kind of always wonder about when Antichrist came into power and everybody had to have the mark of the beast on their forehead or their hand. How is that going to work? Well, I can see how it's going to work now. And without that mark, you cannot engage in any kind of economic commerce. You basically, unless you got somebody who has compassion on you, those who are left behind are going to starve to death that oppose the beast. So anyways, I'm going to start a few passages. We start in Genesis and go through to Revelation, and I'll try to tie it all together. Today I'm just kind of laying a foundation, I guess, for where I'm going with this. And then over the next weeks, I'm going to go back to these other issues and try to work on them one by one, show what the Bible said. What does the Bible say about abortion? Well, we know it's wrong, but the Bible obviously is clear about it. We know that homosexuality is wrong, no matter what the liberal theologians try to tell us. The Bible is very clear on this stuff. The Bible does speak to things like, animal rights and vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is becoming a cause célèbre these days, where they're trying to get rid of the cows because they flatulate and pollute the environment. I mean, it's all crazy stuff. I'm going to begin. If you want to go to your Bible for these, the passages will be Genesis 11, 1 to 9. Then we'll move into Matthew 24. And see if I can turn my page here. 2 Timothy, and then a couple of passages in Revelation. Genesis 11, 1 to 9. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. This was an open rebellion. They went against what God had instructed them to do, to multiply and fill the earth. They were going to stay in one spot. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of Israel builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one. They all have one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Matthew 24, 3 to 12. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See not that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. And all these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And this is the one where I really wanted to focus on. And because iniquity shall abound, and the love of many shall wax old. When I was growing up, I know that Jim's older than me. Bill over there is way older than me. Well, coming up, I came up through the 60s, where the Vietnam was going on and all the protesting and all that kind of stuff. And I was a bit of a news junkie. We would visit my grandparents on a regular basis around supper time. So I would sit there in front of the TV and I'd watch the evening news. Yes, I think it came on at 6:30 and then 7 o'clock. And you see all kinds of stuff going on, students being killed at Kent State. I saw a president assassinated, and his brother assassinated, and Martin Luther King assassinated. And then Charles Manson comes on the scene and does his thing. And I used to think, I'd read passages like this, and I would think to myself, how can it get much worse than this? But here we are. I don't remember that one. Oh, Kevorkian? Yeah. And we had our own thing going on at the time. We had a serial killer in Michigan that was getting away with it for 2 or 3 years down around the Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area, that co-ed murderer. He's up in Marquette now, I think, in the prison there. He's still alive. But all of that stuff's going on. But in spite of all of that, the worst you would get in trouble for at school was what? Chewing gum, talking in class, maybe being late. And now, almost every month, there's a mass shooting going on someplace. And we see this collective societal insanity taking. I just saw an article yesterday on the BBC, or it came from the BBC. They now have identified 100 different genders. Tell me this. How does that happen? You know, if you cut my blood and they cut Mary's blood and look at the genetics, mine is going to be XY, and my wife's is going to be XX. And no matter how much they surgically alter my appearance, the XY is going to be there. It's always going to be there. I am genetically male, no matter what I think in my head. But you see this all this insanity is going on around us. And so, 2 Timothy also, well, I won't read the whole passage, but you get down to 2 Timothy 3, verse 13, but it says, evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. And again, you see this rise of sin. And I think right now we're seeing a rise of what is just like the mask is coming off. There's an open rebellion against God and against the people that God calls his own. Whether it's the Jews or the Christians, I mean, the world hates us. And they're doing everything they can to destroy us. I mean, we had our own previous president said we cling to our guns and our Bibles. And he wanted to fundamentally transform America. Well, that's a strange thing to say. Imagine, Lance, you're dating Heather. Heather says to you, you know, Lance, I really love you, but I really want to transform you first. I want you to change. What kind of a relationship is that going to be? I have no part of that. I told my wife, I said, you ain't changing me. Don't even try. Yeah, I know. She's much more subtle than I am. And then we have, in Revelation 17, 1-3. And there came out of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Then Revelation 13 talks about the beast rising up from the sea. The sea is a metaphor for the human population, I believe. The Antichrist comes onto the scene. But something that I found very interesting as I researched this, I want to show you guys something. I didn't want to go through all the hassle of putting it up on the screen, so I just printed some things off. What I have here, this is, and I'll pass it around so everybody can look at it. This is a 1563 rendering of the Tower of Babel by a Dutch painter by the name of Bruegel. And you see how it's unfinished and the way he has represented it. Now, I found this interesting. If you look at the place where the European Union Parliament is at in Strasbourg, Germany, they have deliberately said they patterned this building after the Tower of Babel. If you take a look, do you see the similarities? And I'll pass it around. You guys take a look at this. And you can see how that painting is reflected in this architecture. And they have openly said that this is what they did. They patterned it after this painting. It's the Parliament building for the European Union in Strasbourg. Now, the European Union has really 2 centers of power. One is in Strasbourg, the other is in Brussels. So, now, we saw in the Scriptures how, in the end time, this woman's going to appear riding on the beast. Okay? Now, this one here, I'm going to show this one to you. I just printed this off, and I'll send it around. This is in front of the building in Brussels. This is a woman riding a beast. Okay? This also is in Brussels. This is another woman riding a beast. And if you look at these two magazines, Der Spiegel, which means the Mirror, and you got two articles that appeared. One is called, it says, Guten Morgen Europa. That means good morning Europe. And on the bottom, they're basically talking about how the old continent is going to rise up and attack the economy of the U.S. And on the cover is a woman riding a beast. You guys see all that? And then there's another one, as the New Europe, same thing, a woman riding a beast with a couple of hands shaking in the middle of the beast. The €5 coin has a picture of the woman riding the beast on it. And then in the corner here, I'll pass this around too, there's a phone card. It says, The Way of the Future in German. So take a look at this. This is fascinating to me. And the more I look at this and I see what's going on, I mean, the structure is in place for Antichrist to make his appearance. He could make his appearance at any time. And these people, I'm beginning to see how when Christ removes the church, these people are going to openly embrace this guy. They're going to love him. They're going to worship him. And any believers that are left behind, they are going to go after to kill. So I found this fascinating and in context of what we see going on around us. So I want to kind of go back now to what it is that's motivating our political system today, at least on the left. And the operative word is Marxism. Marxism, basically their goal is centralized control of everything. The economy, the individual. The ultimate goal is a worldwide utopian order, but God is excluded from it. They're going to do this without God. Their intention is they will decide what's best for the collective good, and we are going to knuckle under. And if we don't, they will use coercion and force to make us do so. They will punish with violence if necessary those who oppose them. Now, these Marxists go by a lot of different names. You got your Marxists, you got your communists, your Leninists, your socialists, your progressives. Hillary Clinton, she openly declared when she was running that she was a progressive. What is a progressive is nothing more than a new name for a Marxist communist socialist. Social Democrats, Christian Democrats, this whole effort. This is what they're trying. The goal is the same for all of them. They want a centralized, controlling authority to basically run our lives. We have seen, again, as we look back at Genesis 11:1-9, God had told the people to spread out, replenish the earth. They rebelled. They were going to keep together, and they were going to build this tower as the central focus of their worship. And really as a symbol of the rebellion against God, God judged them, and he took them and he spread them out by confounding their language. Ever since then, I think man has been trying to undo this judgment in one way or another. We've had Alexander the Great trying to Hellenize the world and make it all a Greek world. Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian Empire, you see him, he sets up his image, and everybody's to bow down and pray to the image and pray to him, nobody else. The Roman Empire, the League of Nations, the United Nations, the European Union, which we now see. The motto of the European Union is many tongues, one voice. So you see, again, there's this rebellion, and there's this effort, again, to create this one world system where God is out of it, and eventually the Antichrist is going to step into the place, and he's going to demand worship for himself. This is not new. I mean, we have had leaders throughout history who have claimed to be deity on earth. I mean, the Caesars claimed it. The Emperor of Japan claims it. Different others throughout the world. I think the Persian kings originally claimed to be deity on earth. So, and the whole point of this liberal thrust that's going on, and with all the little programs they're trying to push through, the whole point is to create a one world system that keeps God out of it. That's what they're attempting to do. Now, we know from the things they say and the things they do and the things they've written that the left hates God, and they hate those who God identifies as his own people. I pulled a few quotes from different sources, from Marx, Stalin, Lenin, others, and I want to kind of go through this. I know a lot of this stuff you've already heard before. Marx claims that religion is the opium of the people, and it's been useful to the ruling classes since it gave the working classes false hope for millennia. Stalin, religion is seen as hindering human development. Lenin, atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. Another writer said communism is incompatible with religious faith. And as we see going on right now, the progressives and democratic socialists in our country, they hate the Judeo-Christian ethic. They're doing everything they can to attack it at its foundation. They're trying to say, in spite of when Tim Schmid came here and showed us all the things that he had seen when he was in Washington, all the inscriptions on the monuments and different places, that the evidence is clear that we were founded on a Judeo-Christian ethic. These people are trying to rewrite the history and make us believe that that's not the case, because they want to make the U.S. eventually a socialist, godless society. I don't know if I'm going to live to see it happen, but what I see going on right here, I fear for my kids. I fear that in my kids' generation, they're going to see probably the first advent of a socialist government in the United States. And when they do, there's going to be a massive economic collapse. It's going to make the Great Depression just look like a walk in the park. Because when they destroy the incentive to make profit and to better yourself economically, it's just going to be. I mean, you look at this Green New Deal that they're trying to push forward. You know, eliminating airplanes. Are they crazy? Eliminating the use of coal and petroleum products to power the economy. Are these people crazy? No, they're not crazy. They have an objective. Their objective is to take the U.S. out of a capitalist system to a communistic socialist system. Say again? Yeah. I would say of all the governments on the earth, we are the most environmentally conscientious. I mean, you take a look at what happens in China and India and these other developing countries. They don't care about them. That tells me the goal is not really the environment. The goal is to... Exactly. And I remember listening to Limbaugh one time. When the Soviet Union fell, the Berlin Wall comes down, and it looks like their brand of communism is now passé. I remember him saying, he said, look, these communists have to find a home. They're going to have to find a place to go, and the place they're going to settle in is going to be the environmental issues. They're going to use environmentalism as a way of attacking our industrial strength and bringing us down so that we are ripe for a socialist takeover. Back in the if you go back to the Second World War, what was it about us that it gave us the ability to defeat three enemies? It was because of our industrial power. We could produce and outproduce anything that they could do. If you ever, I don't know if you ever study it, but if you look at the difference, like say, between the German tanks and the U.S. tanks, the U.S. tanks were generally inferior to the Germans, but we could produce 10 to their 1. They made theirs so technologically advanced that they were very difficult to repair in the field, very difficult and slow to produce. So we accepted the fact that if we're going to go into battle with one of their super tanks, we're going to lose 3 before the 4th one finally takes theirs out. But we got the industrial capacity to make up for the loss. And this is the thing that they are trying to destroy to overtake us and take us into the socialistic orbit. And their ultimate goal, again, is to make the state the object of worship, not God. God's not even a part of the equation for these people. Now, one thing that I've noticed, I began to think about this, that the left uses language and words as weapons to achieve their political goals. Have you noticed how, over the years, they have redefined things? They redefine things and give them new meaning. so that they can mask what they're doing. They can move their agenda forward by redefining things. George Orwell once said, political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. We see that happening all the time. What has the left done? Like the word abortion. They don't like abortion. They're not pro-abortion anymore. They are pro-choice. They changed the definition to hide the fact that abortion is the killing of a child. It's really about the choice of the woman. She has control over her body, not the baby. A Supreme Court Justice, Antonin Scalia, he said, radicals among us have been busy tearing down our language for more than 100 years. They disregard the generally accepted meaning of words and use words in ways that are contrary to their intended meaning. The end result of this subterfuge is to make language ultimately meaningless. And then Samuel Adams, how strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the plain meaning of words. So let's look at some things. Some words that have been redefined, so they no longer have the meaning they used to have, but they have a political meaning now. On the top of my list is the word gay. What did gay used to mean? Happy, carefree, lighthearted. So if I were to say to Lance, Lance, you're looking mighty gay today. He's going to be offended, probably. Oh, that's not. I'm saying what they have done. They've taken this word and they have redefined. They don't want to use homosexual because that's obviously has the negative connotation. And when I was in school, the worst thing anybody could ever call me in the locker room when I was getting dressed after a wrestling match was a homo. That was the worst thing that could be called. I mean, it was offensive. But now they change it. I've got a couple of myself. Not only are they not afraid to say it, but they're militant about it. They want to push it in your face. They're not content just to enjoy their lifestyle. They want to get it out there where everybody sees it, and they want to force you to accept it and force you to condone it. I mean, that's what this is all about. Again, this stuff is satanically inspired. And as I mentioned before, pro-choice. It used to be pro-abortion. You can't say you're pro-abortion because abortion necessarily means you're killing a child. You got to take the negative connotation out of it, so now it is pro-choice. Even though the net result is still the same. You're killing a child. Another one that I've seen for probably the last 15 years. They've taken the words BC and AD, and they've changed them because they don't like them because they have a Judeo-Christian basis. What does BC stand for? Before Christ. What does AD stand for? Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. They don't like that. So you see this now in history books. I see it all the time. They've changed BC to BCE, which stands for before the Common Era. Well, what's the basis for the Common Era? It's still Christ. Well, they can change it, but the Common Era begins with Christ. And they take AD and it's called the Common Era. So they're using their words and they're redefining things to try to get at the Judeo-Christian foundation, really of Western civilization in general, and the United States in particular. Socialist, liberal, that has a negative connotation. They didn't like that, so they changed their name to progressive. I'm a progressive. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a socialist. I am a progressive. Global warming. It's a funny one. I found it hilarious that every time Al Gore would go to one of these conferences to espouse the tenets of his books and his videos, he'd always do so in the middle of a snowstorm. And everybody would say, man, global warming, you're in the middle of a blizzard trying to tell us about global warming. It doesn't make any sense. And, yeah. And he probably went there in a convoy of SUVs, too, once he got off the jet. So what's good for us is not good for them. They have their own hypocritical way of doing things. So global warming is now climate change. Well, climate change can mean anything. Climate has been changing since the beginning of creation. God has changed the climate when he flooded the earth. There's a massive climate change. There's going to be another climate change during the tribulation when the heat of the sun is going to scorch the people on the planet. All climate change, in my opinion, is climate change that is brought on about God Man's ability to change climate is negligible. I just don't think it exists. I mean, what's the main pollutant for climate change? They say it's carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the main pollutant. I ask you, what do plants need to live? They take in carbon dioxide. What do plants give off as a byproduct of their process? Oxygen. So it's part of the natural process. It's not a pollutant. And finally, they have 3 words that they use now, they like to throw at us, are racist, Nazi, fascist. We know what those words used to mean. They meant tyrannical, dictatorial control and oppression and murder and everything else. But now what these words have come to mean is you agree with me, you disagree with me politically, you're a racist. You're a Nazi. You're a fascist. I worked with a guy. He told me, he said, you are a racist. Why? Because you voted for Trump. I whip up my wall and I show him a picture of my family. He says, I don't care. You just did that so that you could defend yourself of being called a racist. I said, there's no point arguing with an idiot like you. I'm never going to win. You know, my family is 20% integrated. How about yours? And so, in redefining these words, the left also does something that's called projection. They project onto other people the things they are actually guilty of. They call President Trump a Nazi, but they're the ones who utilize Antifa and other violent groups to do what they want, which smacks of the brown shirts of the Nazis to me. And they will surround a political opponent in a restaurant and drive them out of the restaurant so they can't enjoy their meal. They accuse us of being the Nazis, but they behave like the Nazis all the time. And what they want is absolute tyrannical, dictatorial control over everything that we can say and do. They are the ones guilty of the things that they are trying to accuse us of doing, but it's just a mask, a camouflage for what they really are and what their objectives are. I heard the bell, so next week I'll dig into each of these issues. We'll start out with the more obvious ones, abortion, homosexuality. We know that these things are wrong, but let's again review what the Bible says about these things, because the Bible's very clear. You were going to say something, Fred? Okay. I have an aunt who I believe is a godly Christian woman, and I have a second cousin. Her grandson is openly gay. He wants to have a gay wedding. He wants her to help him plan it. She has refused to do it. She said, this guy claimed to be a Christian once. And she says to him, what's the next page out of the Bible you want me to tear out so you can justify your lifestyle? And I don't know. This is what we're up against. So we'll talk about these things, and I think it'll be more fun getting into the less obvious things like the environmentalism, animal rights, all that kind of stuff, how those also are a part of the overall plan to create a society that excludes God and the people that are the Lord's. So, any questions or comments? We got this morning. Yeah, Robin. Going to Holly? Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever read Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford? He was the guy in charge of Plymouth Plantation when they first came to the U.S. to set up the colony. He wrote a book, and they initially tried a little bit of socialism when they established the colony, and it failed, and it resulted in a lot of starvation in the first year they were there. Then they went to private property ownership. They went to more of a capitalistic system, and the colony then prospered and thrived, and they were able to pay off their debts to their European backers much earlier than they otherwise would have had to, because of the prosperity they had by going from that to a more productive capitalistic kind of way of doing things, where everybody was given a plot of land, and he was responsible for his own land and raising his own property, or raising his own crops, and sustaining his own family, and that worked. The other thing didn't, because there's a resentment when you're working hard for that guy over there who's not working so hard, and you think to yourself, why should I have to work that hard when he doesn't want to work that hard? And then it just sets up the never-ending cycle of unproductivity. What was that? that we're going to go there. Yeah, that's what I wanted to go to. How they're changing. They're even changing the definition of words. I want to know how they're going to deal with foreign language, because in the ones I've studied, every foreign language, English has it to a very limited extent, but words have genders. You have masculine, neuter, and feminine words. How are they going to change that? You know, these people are trying to make a non-gender society.